Hello friends, this is Jim with Science Talk. This video is sort of like part 2 of the video I just discussed with you about land degradation. This one talks about biodiversity. Before I share this story with you, please let me remind you to subscribe to my channel, to share this video and my work with others, have them also share my work, to hit the bell so that you know when I drop a video. I also ask you to please support my work. I'm doing this by myself, trying to get this information out to a wide population of people so that they know what's going on. Become a patron at patreon.com/Science Talk with Jim Massa. I can also be found on Steemit. So, to the story at hand. Biggest biodiversity study in a decade finds current biodiversity loss dangerous for human well-being. The authors of the most in-depth biodiversity study in a decade warn that the loss of species and habitats is as great a risk to global flourishing as climate change. The report, a compilation of 4 regional assessments on the status of biodiversity ecosystem services in the Americas, Asia, and the Pacific, Africa, Europe, and Central Asia, was compiled by the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, IPBES, that I mentioned in a previous video. This is an independent research organization comprised of 129 member governments that has been described as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, of Biodiversity. And I mentioned that in my previous video. The assessments, which were approved at the IPBES plenary in Medellin, Colombia, I probably pronounced that wrong. I don't know, it's Medellin or Medellin. I don't know if they anglicized the spelling so that the 2 L's become an L or a Y. Anyway, it's Medellin, Colombia, with a work of 3 years and more than 550 experts. 5 times the amount of experts in my previous video. They concluded that biodiversity was declining to such an extent in all the regions studied as to put nature's ability to support human well-being at risk. This is in addition to what I alluded to in my previous video about carrying capacity, the amount of available resource to sustain the numbers of a population. As an example, the Asia-Pacific assessment found that if fishing continues in the region at current rates, there will be nothing left to fish by 2048. In addition, more than half of all African mammal and bird species could be extinct due to climate change by 2100. I again cannot recommend highly enough the work of Elizabeth Colbert in her book, The Sixth Extinction. The current loss of biodiversity in all 4 regions also threatens their ability to meet the United Nations Sustainable Developmental Goals, SDGs as they're called, not to mention other UN benchmarks such as the Aichi biodiversity targets under the Strategic Plan for Biodiversity 2011 to 2020 and the goals set by the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. Acting to protect and promote biodiversity is at least as important to achieving these commitments and to human well-being as is the fight against global climate change, IPBES Executive Secretary Dr. Anne Larragaudere said. More biodiversity helps protect against the effects of climate change, as Dr. Larragaudere explained. Richer, more diverse ecosystems are better able to cope with disturbances such as extreme events and the emergence of diseases. And climate change, along with overuse of resources, habitat destruction, pollution, and the spread of invasive, non-native species, is one of the driving forces behind biodiversity loss, the report found. For example, if current trends continue, the assessment on the Americas found that climate change will overtake changing use of land as the #1 cause of biodiversity loss in the region. And here's a nice indictment of the past few centuries. Their results also reflect the legacy of colonialism. The populations of Europe and Central Asia use more renewable resources than the land mass can currently produce. So they're even using renewable resources, but they're not replenishing it in sufficient amount so that the net is still a negative. That's basically what that's saying. Populations of species in the Americas are 31% smaller than they were when European colonization began, and could be 40% smaller by 2050. The report supported indigenous knowledge and land use practices as potential models for how to use natural resources for human benefit while still protecting biodiversity. However, the cultures that possess this knowledge are also in jeopardy. More than 60% of indigenous languages and cultures in the Americas are declining or dying. There is some bit of good news here. The report indicates that the Asia-Pacific region, in that region, forest area has increased by 2.5% in 25 years, and the number of marine areas under protection has grown by 14% in the same time frame. More is still needed to offset biodiversity loss, but at least there's a little bit of positive in there. The assessments also provide potential policy solutions that governments could implement to protect and promote biodiversity. There's no silver bullet or one-size-fits-all answers. The best options in all 4 regional assessments are found in better governance, integrating biodiversity concerns into sectoral policies and practices, for example, agriculture and energy. The application of scientific knowledge and technology, increase awareness and behavioral changes. That's Dr. Watson again, I mentioned in my previous video. On the individual level, Dr. Watson recommended wasting less energy, food and water, eating a more sustainable diet that emphasizes chicken and vegetables and avoids beef. You heard me share with you that to raise beef requires much more energy, much more land, much more water to get, say, 1 kilogram of beef than it would to get the same amount in plants of chickens. So, once again, the politicians need to pay heed to the sciences. They also need to start educating themselves on the scientific principles and concepts. They need to change the business practices. This is what's needed. We need to make better use of our land, as basically just indicated. Grow more crops. As I said before, if I have 100 acres and 100 acres grows 10 pounds of beef, whereas it can grow 100 pounds of food, vegetables, which is better? Which will go a further way? It's not difficult to see. So we're losing biodiversity, we're losing land. Obviously you can see how they go together. And practices do need to be changed. that's clear as day that this is what must happen. Is there the political will to do so? And if so, will enough be done as quickly as possible in time? I don't know. So far, I can't say I'm all that optimistic. And what will happen is we will very likely, if things continue, between climate change, regions become uninhabitable, forest degradation, insufficient food to feed people, diseases could spread, become pandemics. We could start seeing a huge die-off of human population. Nature's way of correcting that negative feedback loop I have mentioned before. You know, too many people, well, nature will find a way to correct matters. It goes back to Rachel Carson saying that humans are part of nature, not separate from it. And I think that's the first mindset that really needs to be ingrained and stressed. So, stay tuned. Let's see if changes are coming. Thank you for your time. Thank you for watching.